Hi, and welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast, co-hosted by Abby Thiering, the Badass Breastfeeder, and Dianne Cassidy, IBCLC.
Hi, welcome to episode 5 of the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. I'm Dianne Cassidy, lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder.
And this week, we are going to talk all about those first crazy days home with your newborn. Just a quick mention about last week's podcast. Got tons of cool feedback on my Facebook page about extended breastfeeding and moms that are extended breastfeeders and how much they're enjoying it and how, challenges that they come across or, things that they're doing. So please keep all the info coming and keep all the feedback coming. We love to hear it. But this week we're going to talk all about what it's like to come home with your newborn and what it's like to all of a sudden realize I am a mom. Now what happens? Do you remember those days, Abby?
Yes. And the intensity of realizing that your role in life has shifted from, taking care of yourself to taking care of another helpless human being. And it's no wonder people are, that go, I don't think that I was truly postpartum depressed or anything, but I definitely had some dark days in those early days with my first. And it was, I remember I didn't know when I first got pregnant, I didn't know anybody who had babies. It was the first of one of all my friends to have a baby. And so first the labor, I didn't know, I knew nothing about nothing. The labor was terrible. It was induced. And then, then there's all these people in your house. You read all these books and it's like, everything's going to be okay. And this is normal and all this stuff. But then there's doctors and these nurses are in your room all the time. And they're like, oh, something's wrong or something wrong and all this, stuff. We have to take him for a test. And my baby didn't pee. Jack didn't pee within the time where you're supposed to pee. So they're like, oh, we have to take him down for a test of his kidneys. I mean, I was a freaking mess.
Yeah.
In the room, just freaking out. And my doctor came back a little later on in the day. And she was like, that's so stupid. She's like, I know how to make a baby pee. She's like, I could have made that baby pee.
Tap the bladder.
Yeah. Just sprinkle some water on his penis. She was like, he would have peed. But then they have all this, but there's no communication. There's no, everyone's just, ugh. Anyway, so we came home and I was so anxious. And I'm an anxious person anyway. And so now I have this new baby and I didn't know what was going on. Nobody told me that, I was going to be feeling this way. I was supposed to be overjoyed. I was supposed to be like, oh my God, enjoy my newborn baby. I was supposed to be all these happy things. And I was terrified. I don't even know of what. And I was having these intrusive thoughts. I was having thoughts of my baby laying on the ground and a chair falling onto his head. Where in the world, situations that were so illogical, it never would happen. When would my baby be on the floor?
Right.
But then, and then later on I found out intrusive thoughts in the newborn days is actually quite common for a new mom. And I'm like, oh, well, that's great that somebody told me hey, this is a really big thing that just happened to you. All these feelings are quite normal. And of course you're going to be feeling a little overwhelmed because your whole entire life just changed.
Exactly.
But nobody says that. I feel like we hate feelings in America. We're the country that's got the most anxiety, people suffering from anxiety, people suffering from depression, and yet talking about this stuff is so taboo. It can't, if you bring it up, it's just oh my God, you're depressed and you should probably get on medication. And
everybody's afraid they're going to call CPS.
Right.
They're going to take my baby. If I admit that I have these intrusive thoughts, they're going to take my baby away. And I don't even know where that came from. Where did that start?
I don't know, because everybody is calling CPS on people. They're CPS is so involved in hospital. People, you even see it, people are oh, there was a woman outside of my house one time, and this is just a little side story, but she was outside my house and she's got 10 kids across the street. Oh, and she's living in this, ton of kids. And she's living in this little, we're not exactly sure what the building is, but it's some sort of adult support program. And, she was screaming at her kids one day, screaming on the street. And then she whacked one of them. She whacked one of them across the shoulder. And I was like holding my baby and I was just like, holy shit, oh my God. And she's like, I think I posted on Facebook about it and somebody was like, you should call CPS. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Why is that the reaction? Why wouldn't I go outside and be like, hey, can I help? Hey, do you want to how about you send your little ones over here to play for a couple hours? And you go do what you need to do. Why are we calling CPS on people who, I mean, obviously I'm a social worker. There are situations that children shouldn't be in.
Right.
But like just this, like, somebody is having a hard time, call CPS. Like, why can't we help? And that's like the thing is like, like feelings and like that kind of stuff is so taboo, and asking for help and accepting help is so taboo.
So taboo.
I mean, I wouldn't do it either. People are like, can I come over and bring dinner? I was like, no. I'm like hiding in my house. This like darkness around me. Like, I'm so scared. I don't know what's going on. Everybody stay away.
Because people don't want anybody to think they can't handle it.
Yeah.
But this is a huge transition.
Mm-hmm.
It is a huge transition in life. And we shouldn't be looking at this as, oh, okay, you're just going to go on with your life. And that's what people think. They think during pregnancy, everybody's celebrating this pregnancy and they're having these parties and giving all these gifts and, oh, it's going to be great. You either get this, oh my gosh, you're having a baby, celebrate the world, which of course it is a wonderful thing. Or you get those people that say, oh, you're never going to sleep again.
Yeah.
You're never going to do blah, blah, blah. Or wait till you have your baby. My insides fell out. Like, nobody wants to like talk about the reality of it. And then you have this child, I've had moms in my office, like, day 3 or day 4. I remember this one dad specifically. They discharged the night before. Well, first of all, the night of discharge, you go home from the hospital. This baby is 2 days old. They go home and it's horrific. It's horrific the first night home for most, probably 85% of the families. And I mean, and I try to tell them the next day, they're like, oh my God, it was so awful. And I remember that going home with my babies. I remember thinking to myself, this is not the same baby I had in the hospital. I don't know whose baby this is, but this is not the same baby. And I tell people, you put your baby in a car seat, you got them dressed, you've got pets, you've got, company. The stimulation is so overwhelming that now you've got a baby that's going to cry all night. This is transition. This is figuring out life now with this new baby. And I had this one dad that looked at me and he goes, well, we couldn't put him down all night.
Yeah.
Because people think you bring this baby home, you feed him, you change your diaper, you put them down, everybody goes to sleep for a couple hours. 3 hours later, you do
that's
it
what
again.
happens in the movies. That's what happens in the TV shows and the movies and all that.
Why would you think any differently?
Right.
And
yeah.
Then it's not like that. And you go, oh my God, something's wrong. Why is this happening? Why is this baby not okay with everything? He's got this $400 crib. Why don't they want to sleep there? I don't understand.
Exactly. and on top of like all this stuff that just happened with your body too, you have all these sensations you never had. I had an episiotomy with my first child. I couldn't sit. So I'm like sitting on one. I sat on my left cheek for like 2 months.
Oh my God.
And then it's like I'm trying to hold the baby, and every time I stand up, there's like this pressure on my stitches on my vagina, and like, it's like, it's just crazy. And you think that something's wrong with you. You think that something's wrong with your baby, and there's some woman across the street who's got a new baby, and she thinks something's wrong with her, and she thinks something's wrong with her baby, and like we're so isolated, and we can't come together on this. Because, I would never, people don't want to admit that all this stuff is happening to them because they think it's weird and strange and wrong.
Weird and strange and wrong, and that they're going to get in trouble somehow. Or that they're a bad mom, that this is happening. They're a bad mom. And we're just crying like crazy. Crying all the time. Mm-hmm. And even now, like, I see moms and they're like, well, I've just been crying. Or I'm sorry. They'll be crying on the phone to me, and I'm like, my husband probably thinks I'm crazy. All I do is cry. It's the hormones. Nobody talks about the hormone changes. The hormone changes are unbelievable, and they'll never be that extreme ever in your life, except for when you have a baby.
Right. And that's when people are like, oh, well, you're probably depressed and you need to go on medication. And it's like, seriously, by all means, if you need medication, then by all means, take medication. But just because you're having feelings doesn't mean that something's wrong with you. This is a stage in life. This transition is going to be crazy. And it doesn't mean that you're crazy. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. Like, it is really intense.
It's really, and
it
then
doesn't equal something's wrong with you.
it absolutely does not equal. You're right. It does not equal something's wrong. And then, you know, you go to the pediatrician, the pediatrician says, you know, how's everything going? And if you look a little weepy, if you look a little sad, then they're like, do you feel like you're going to hurt the baby? It's like, that's automatically what you go to. It's like, there is a whole series of in between on that scale that nobody talks about. It's either you feel great or you're going to hurt your baby. And I'm like, there's a lot more involved there. How about you feel overwhelmed? How about you're not sleeping and that's adding to it? How about, you know, like, why don't we find resources? Why don't we talk about this so that mothers aren't so shocked?
Right. And most mothers are trying to breastfeed at this point, right? I mean, most of them are trying to breastfeed, and it's probably going really horribly, you know, which is adding to all of this stress. Like, how come I cannot, you know, take care of this baby? I remember leaving the hospital with my baby in the little carry car thing, and they're like, they walk us out. Yeah. And I was just like, they're going to let us leave with this baby?
Oh, I know.
Like, they're going to actually let me just take this baby home? Like, I am not qualified for this new job. Like, how are they just like, how?
I know. I remember even saying to somebody, I can't take care of myself. Right. Like, how am I supposed to take care of this baby? Right. There was no way that I felt like I could take care of a baby.
Well, and I think there's so many, and it's such a disempowering like place to be, because how dare I ask myself if I can take care of my baby? Of course I can. You know, it's just like we're so trained, especially as women, to think that like we can't do things, and that we're going to, you know, we're so doubtful of everything because, you know, we live in this society where, you know, it's just doubtful of women. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, with my second child, when I had developed this community of people and understood a little bit more about newborns, and I remember with my first child, I was constantly closing the curtains, and I was constantly like, shh, you know, be quiet. It's got to be dark. And I don't care if it's 2:00 in the afternoon. Shut the curtains. And like, by the time my second came, I was scared to go to a hospital again. I had him in my living room. Yeah. And I was like, with the curtains wide open, I think the windows were open too. And I was just like, I just pushed this baby out. And people are like coming by the next day. They come to see the baby. They're like tiptoeing in. And me and my husband are like, come on in. Yeah. Come on in. Come on here. Sit. They're like, we don't want to interrupt. We're like, come on. Get in this house. Interrupt, please. We need people to come. We want people to be here. And it was just like, very noisy and very exactly noisy like that.
Noisy like my dog. It is
just like night and day, just based on like the level of support and community that I had the second time.
And it's the level of community, the level of support, having people around you makes a huge difference. And people that you at least, you know, that you trust, that you are feeling the same feelings that you are. I co-facilitate a postpartum support group for, you know, postpartum anxiety and mood disorders and things like that. And there was one group we had a couple of months ago where this one mom just like came out with it and was just like, I'm having these horrible intrusive thoughts. Mm-hmm. And like everybody else in the room was like, I have those too. And these were people that were coming for weeks that never said anything. And somebody else just needed to come out with it and be like, this is what I'm dealing with. And we were like, this is why, we'll tell you why it's happening. We'll tell you how normal it is. We'll tell you, you know, but nobody wants to admit that this is going on.
Yeah. And I am a mental health professional. Like I have a graduate degree in you know, feelings. Yeah. And like, I you know, postpartum is not my area of expertise, but you think that I would have at least come across this information at some point. And I'd never heard it before. I'd never heard like postpartum, having babies, any of that stuff. No. I'd never come across any of this information. And it's like nobody's getting it until you're holding your baby and you're at home, or even not even then, until like way later.
And you know, what always kind of was amazing to me. Now, when I had my first son, he was born, you know, in an Army hospital in North Carolina. And he was born on July 22nd, and we had to be gone from that town because we were done there by August 1st.
Oh my God.
So my focus was not this child necessarily. It was like, all right, we gotta go. We're packing a house. We're, you know, packing cars, whatever we were doing. And when I got, we got back up here to Rochester, and I was like, okay, the next one is going to be different. I'll be able to relax. I'll be able to enjoy it. And, we had to stop. We came from North Carolina. We had to stop every 2 hours to breastfeed and change a diaper. It took us 3 days to get back here.
Oh my God.
Like, I'm not even exaggerating. It took 3 days. And it was just like, I remember thinking to myself, like the next time it'll be easier. And it was twins and it wasn't easier, but that's a different story. So I thought like I was the only one that would have had to do something like that. And now I meet these people every single day that have a baby and are moving, that have a baby and are changing a job, that are having a baby and one of their parents died during their pregnancy. Like crazy, unbelievable life changes that are happening on top of having a baby. And it happens all the time. And I don't know if it's just we don't appreciate how life-changing having a baby is, that we plan all these other things, or it's that these babies aren't necessarily planned all the time, and you go, oh my gosh, I need a bigger house, I need a better job, I need, like all this other stuff. So, but all of that on top of it, I was in a house the other day, and there's like boxes piled up because they had just moved. Like, it's just, it happens all the time. You have to process all of that. That all has to be processed. And you have a new baby that you're trying to learn how to breastfeed and keep alive. And you're trying to heal, which nobody appreciates how much that plays into the role of everything. It's crazy how overwhelming it gets.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. I don't think people do know. I think there's things that you can do to prepare for the transition into motherhood, but not much. I think the best things that you could do are like to have a community of people to be there, to share what's going on with you. But like, there's no way to really explain what it feels like to be sitting in your living room holding a new baby and be like, and have that realization that you're now responsible for this human being.
Right.
Like there's no way to really fully explain it until you feel it. And yeah, I think that's what we need to really normalize, like feelings and asking for help and accepting help, because you're going to go through that transition, whether you like it or not. You can't be like, okay, well, I read all the books and now, it's going to be a smooth transition. Like it's probably not going to be.
No. And the books are so deceiving.
Yeah.
They're so deceiving. And even some of the best breastfeeding books, because you can't put into words what is happening. And,
right.
The breastfeeding, even the video that I show for prenatal breastfeeding classes, I mean, I love the video, but a lot of it I feel like is geared towards what you're dealing with a month in, not those newborn phases, and they'll say, oh, breastfeeding shouldn't last longer than 20 minutes. Are you kidding me? With a baby that's 3 days old that's falling asleep every 2 seconds? Like, how is that working? And then moms get this in their head. Oh, in the book that I read when I was pregnant, my baby shouldn't be feeding longer than 20 minutes. My baby shouldn't be feeding, this frequently. My baby should go 3 hours. My baby should. And it's like, but in the first month, that's not happening.
That's not going to happen.
And nobody realizes that. These babies that are so overstimulated, especially maybe you had this with Jack once your second baby was born, that second baby or that third baby or that fourth baby, they are so overstimulated just from the activity going on in the house. I mean, I'm overstimulated with what goes on in my house. I couldn't imagine bringing a newborn into this craziness sometimes. Yeah. And I have moms that are like, oh my gosh, the baby is so fussy. And I'll be sitting there and the dog is barking and their 4-year-old and their 2-year-old are running around and they're banging on drums and, God knows what else is happening. And it's like, well, this is just kind of the norm. The baby's going to have to adjust and they will. Yeah. But this is just, they're going to be overstimulated in the beginning. That's just how it is. And the more activity and the more stuff that's going on, but it's their life. So they'll get used to it. It's not the end of the world. And I think just knowing, okay, this is normal, at least in this family, this is how it should be, then that's okay too. I think it lets moms kind of breathe that sigh of relief and go, oh, okay, so this isn't, I haven't screwed my baby up because he's so fussy. It's just normal.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I read comments like on my blogs sometimes where I'll write something about, the newborn days after Jack or after Exley and I try to write as honestly as I can because I don't know what else to do. And I'm not writing like some what to expect. Like I'm going to write like exactly what happened and people will comment, oh, this this is a really scary, like, I don't think this blog post is going to do anything except scare people. Well, I mean, see, this is how we get into this thing where it's like, okay, I'm talking about some really big feelings in a really hard time. And people are like, oh my God, you can't talk about that. Don't talk about that. It's going to scare people.
You're going to scare them.
No. Not talking about it is going to screw her over because she is not going to understand why everyone's like, oh, it's so wonderful. Let's not talk about the feelings. Don't talk about the bad stuff. Don't talk about the bad stuff. La, 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 la.
Nobody wants to know.
And bad stuff's happening, big feelings, scary feelings. And it's like, oh, nobody's talking about this. I'm the only one.
Yeah. And we had a mom in our postpartum group about a year ago who she sat there one day and she goes, I am pissed. I am pissed that nobody said anything to me about this. I am pissed. She goes, I have so many friends that have had babies. And when I was pregnant, all they did was tell me how wonderful things were. She goes, I am pissed. How can it, she goes, and then when I tell them how much I'm struggling, I'm not sure if the baby's eating right, I'm not sleeping, I'm recovering, I had a C-section that I didn't want to have, whatever is happening, they say, oh yeah, I felt that way too. But nobody says anything at the time because you don't want to scare anybody. Nobody wants to feel it. They just want to leave it behind them. I just want to leave it behind me and move on. That's all I want to do. Just
right.
Leave it behind me and move on.
Yeah, I think that's how you end up having more kids, is that your brain pushes out all the bad stuff from the first one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to forget. Otherwise, people are like, why? The first time I was like, why? I would never, ever do this again. I will never do this again. And then after a few months, it was like, oh, should we have another baby?
I know.
You have to, I think it's survival. It's a survival thing to
yeah.
To forget the bad stuff. But yeah, I know. I remember being pissed too. And the other thing that pisses me off, since we're on the topic, when people keep saying, they're like, oh, it gets better. It gets better at 3 months. Oh, it gets better at 6 months. Oh, it gets better at 9 months. Stop saying that. Stop saying that. Maybe it's different at each one of those milestones, but you can't be telling people constantly that it's going to get better because, first of all, she's going to start hoping that it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
I was hopeful that it was going to get better. I was just like, oh, it's going to get better. They keep saying it's going to get better. No.
And people
it's just having a baby.
People even ask me that now because, of course, in the circle that I'm in, a lot of my friends have younger kids, and I've got these teenagers and they'll be like, please tell me it gets better. And I'm like, it's different. It's just different.
It's different.
There's more challenges. There's different challenges. It's just different. It's not, I'm not going to say it's easy.
Right. Yeah. Like Jack, my oldest, he's 6 and he's kind of transitioning into this, he's getting away from toddlerhood and moving into small, older kid, young kid. Uh-oh. Oh boy. Here. It's okay. Come on. Exley, come here. It's okay. It's all right. And here. See, I had this is my 3-year-old crying and it's okay. It's all right.
That's your barking dog.
So here. This is the proof that 3 years old is still very challenging. But so Jack is he's transitioning from being kind of a older toddler to a kid, and he's starting to have friends around. And yesterday I was like, wow, this is actually kind of easy. I had his friend over, they were playing. I was sitting at the table reading a magazine and I was like, oh my God, is this what everybody keeps talking about? Is this when it's going to be better? It's going to be so easy. And then they got into a fight, him and his friend. Oh my
gosh, really?
And then they were arguing and she got really mad and she left and he was crying. He was so upset. And then there's my little boy, was upset having this relationship problem with somebody else. And my heart was just, dying.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's different. It's not easier. It's just different.
Just different. Mm-hmm. It's different. And there's a challenge at every stage, beginning from when you bring that baby home. And it's, being able to face these challenges or at least accept, okay, this is not easy. Let me find a solution to the problem.
Right.
Because it's not easy. It's not easy bringing these little ones home and then figuring out what they need. And they can't talk to you.
No.
So you really have to kind of figure out what they need. And unfortunately, everybody thinks when you're breastfeeding that the breastfeeding is the problem. No matter what your baby's doing, the problem is breastfeeding.
Yeah.
No matter what it is. And I get that all the time. Mom's calling me with this, oh, my baby's doing this, my baby's this, my baby's... I'm like, this is not... I can't tell you how many times I don't think this is a feeding problem. Like, this is not a feeding problem. This is a, problem with your baby being gassy or your baby... And those are not... Well, something I'm eating. No, it's not. It's...
Yeah, right. That whole thing, yeah.
That. It's just your baby with a new digestive system, or it's just your baby not settling, or it has nothing to do with the feeds. Moms, the other thing that I'm thinking all the time, or not even moms, but the grandmother, the father, the support person, whoever they are, thinking, well, why the baby always has to be held. The baby always has to be held. They will not settle down. Why can't we put the baby down? Why can't the baby go somewhere? Why can't the baby sleep longer than in 45 minutes without somebody holding them? Mm-hmm. And trying to explain that whole fourth trimester to people, is that should be explained to them before they have the baby.
Right.
It shouldn't be happening while they're in the middle of it, because then that probably is scary. But knowing your baby is going to want to be held all the time, they do not know that they're perfectly safe. Your baby has no idea that it's April 30th or August 30th, 2017. And they're perfectly safe. They have zero concept of that. And the only thing they know is their mom and dad holding them. And that's it. Like,
can you imagine going from like this warm, kind of like slimy, all-encompassing bath to like a bassinet?
Loud.
That would
bright
be, loud,
cold.
bright. Yeah, God.
Loud, bright, and cold. And if we just go, oh my gosh, what's wrong with them? They're crying. They don't like this thing that I got them. I remember going into one person's house once and they had every single item that you could possibly buy to put your baby in. Everything that rocks and moves. Some of these things look like a spaceship. They're like up and circling around, and I'm like, and they're like, "Yep, baby doesn't like any of them. Gotta hold them." Yeah.
Yep. You do.
That's just.
Yep.
That's just how it is.
You can, and people don't know, like you can lay down in bed with your baby. You can baby wear. You can do all of these things that will free up your hands, that will allow you to rest as well. You don't have to like jog around and hold your baby and like all of that. You can relax with your baby too.
Yeah, your baby does, they do not get this, horrible aversion to everybody else on the planet if you hold them. Like it's, they just need to really, get acclimated to the life around them, and that takes a little time. Mm-hmm. But I remember reading this blog once. I thought it was so funny. It was a mom just had a baby, and she was like, I'm a blogger. When I was pregnant, I would sit in a coffee shop and type. And I figured when I had my baby, I would sit in a coffee shop with my baby and type.
Oh, God.
Like, that's what was going to happen. The baby would be in the seat and in the car seat, and I would do everything that I ever did before just with a baby. Mm-hmm. What a shock it was that it wasn't like that. Yeah, nobody talks about it.
Yeah. You remember like in the very early days, my friends were like, my not having baby friends were like, oh, why don't we should just come over? Let us just come over with like a bottle of wine, and we'll just like hang out. We'll just like hang out, and we'll just hang out with you. And I was like, what?
Yeah, no.
Like I could not even wrap my brain around that happening. Like forget about the logistics of how that would work, but I couldn't even wrap my brain around me doing that. Like I don't need that. I need to sit and stare at a wall and freak out. Like I was like, I sit and like,
yeah. And everybody needs to be okay with that. They all need to be okay with that. So Abby's freaking out right now. Just leave her alone. Right. She'll be fine in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Because trying to pretend that everything is fine is way more exhausting.
No, there was like no way I could imagine sitting there and like, what? I just wanted to be like, do you have any idea what's happening to me? Like, do you have any idea what's happening? But they didn't. They had no idea.
No, they don't. And what I always, tell people prenatally too, like if you have company after you have a baby, they need to have a job to do. Like, people don't just come over and hang out. Like, they better be bringing groceries, or there is a job for them, or else
cleaning, taking out the garbage,
something, or they are not there.
Yeah, and holding the baby while you go take a shower. I'm like, if that was the other thing is like, if right now, if somebody said like, can I come over and, bring a bottle of wine and hang out? I'd be like, yeah, you can. I'll be taking a shower and, you can watch my kids and I'll run to the grocery store and by all means, bring a bottle of wine and hang out on my couch.
I know. It's just fine. Hope you don't mind if I'm not here with you.
I won't be here.
But I do have a lot of moms that feel like they have to entertain their guests.
Yeah. Well, that's a cultural thing too, right?
It absolutely is. Yeah, it absolutely is. And nobody feels comfortable saying, I'm sorry, you need to either, I cannot have this company tonight. I did have somebody one time who figured out very quickly that the times when she had company was when her newborn was very, very fussy in the evening. And she's like, we just finally said, we need to have a couple of nights of nobody over. And the baby did so much better. She goes, and of course I got that whole, oh, you're a new parent, of course, from my sister. You're one of those parents. And it's like, well, you have to do what's right for you.
Right.
People will get over it. They'll get over it.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, yeah.
So I think what we've determined here is that we need to talk about feelings more. We need to feel the feels and admit that they are there, especially after you have a baby. And do not be afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
Whatever they may be. Nobody's going to judge you. Nobody's calling CPS.
Right.
Nobody is thinking you're the worst mom in the world. We are going to tell you how normal it is to feel like this when you have a baby.
Totally.
And if anybody has anything they want to add or talk to us about your experience with it or bring it out there, we would love to hear it. I can be reached through my website, which is Dianne Cassidy Consulting. 2 N's in Dianne, by the way, Dianne. And then also you can reach us through Abby's email.
thebadassbreastfeeder@gmail.com.
And we want to hear from you. And stay tuned next week. We are going to be talking about milk supply, which is always a controversial hot topic. And can't wait to hear what everybody has to say about that. So we will see you next time.
Bye.